Good morning, Jamaica. It is another post-cabinet press briefing, and today is Wednesday, June 24. And it's a really good day when you see the two ministers that we have with us this morning. And so it's a pleasure for me to have in the audience today and our guests, the Honorable Edmund Bartlett, our Minister of Tourism, the best tourism minister anywhere in the world. And it's always such a wonderful honor to have him here this morning. Also, the Honorable Matthew Samuda, Minister of Water, Environment and Climate Change, Mr. Climate Change himself, leading the global movement towards climate change. He is a world leader in that sense. And so it's good to have both of them here. We're off to a little bit of a late start. And I tell you a little bit about our cabinet. So we usually have a little meeting before post-cab starts. And this morning, Minister Samuda and I were able to be sitting at the feet of Minister Bartlett, and he was giving us a political history class and helping us to understand politics, how we got here, what we need to do going forward as a country. That's the nature of our cabinet. And that's why I'm always, feel so privileged to be a part of this group. You have those who've been there for a while and who have led so wonderfully here and around the world, taking the time to help to direct us who are newer at this game. And so that was really very wonderful this morning, and so that's why we are late. We were getting schooled. Also, I have to acknowledge the others who are here, Dr. Kassan Troop, Permanent Secretary, and I'm sorry, other ministers, the best ministry, the Ministry of Education, Skills, Youth, and Information. Ms. Jennifer Griffith, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism, a really wonderful PS also. When I was a young public servant, she was always so kind to me, and I've never forgotten how kind you were, and so it's really nice to have you here, P.S. Griffith. Also, one of the, real rising star PSs also, we have Mr. Wayne Robertson with us, who's Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Water, Environment and Climate Change. We also have Donovan White, our Director of Tourism, Dr. Kerry Wallace, Executive Director of the Tourism Enhancement Fund. We have senior technical staff from all of the ministries represented here. We also have student leaders from the UE Guild and UTEC Students Union, and also CMU's union. And as always, I say good morning to the members of the media who are here, and of course Jamaicans watching at home and abroad. We are going to get straight into it this morning. We're going to be starting off with the wonderful Minister of Water, Environment and Climate Change, who remembers the map and every single water system that exists in Jamaica. He knows them and he can just reel them off. I don't know how he does it, what he does at night. He studies all of this stuff, but he is absolutely amazing. Always great to hear him speak and to show you that he really has full command over his portfolio. So please join me in welcoming the Honorable Matthew Samuda.
Thank you, colleague Minister, the Honorable Dana Dixon. It's also a pleasure to join a colleague, friend, mentor in Minister Ed Bartlett, and of course, welcome to PS's, heads of agencies, team members. It's a good collection you have here this morning, Minister Dixon, of very solid public servants who do yeoman service for Jamaica. This morning, I'm here with PS Wayne Robertson to officially update the country that Jamaica has been selected to host the Our Oceans Conference, the 13th edition of same, in Montego Bay in 2029. We are likely to host it in June, final date to be announced. Now, for those who may not be familiar with what the Our Oceans Conference is, it is the largest conference that deals with ocean protection and the blue economy outside of the UN Ocean Conference. We expect at a minimum to host in Jamaica in excess of 5,000 delegates. We would expect no less than a dozen world leaders and approximately 50 delegations which would be led at the ministerial level. This is a major major event that establishes Jamaica's thought leadership on the issue of marine protection and the issue of developing a sustainable blue economy. It validates a lot of the work that Jamaica has been doing in tourism, in fisheries, in shipping and logistics, and of course our work in environmental protection. But why Montego Bay? Well, A, it's beautiful. B, it has sufficient room stock. Additionally, it also has the convention center. But why Montego Bay for an Oceans Conference? Well, for those of you who are not familiar with it, the UN Law of the Sea was actually accepted and came into being in Montego Bay. So Montego Bay, Jamaica, has always been the center of ocean governance, and we are re-establish it as such in 2029. There will be significant updates that will come over the period. Over the next year, we will establish our planning secretariat, but we will keep you up to date as we move forward with the planning of this significant global event in Jamaica. Last week, I had the privilege of representing Jamaica at our Oceans 11 in Mombasa, Kenya. And while present, I wish to provide an update on 5 matters that should occupy the attention of members of the media here. Firstly, Jamaica had the opportunity to sign and join the Caribbean Ocean Coordination Mechanism. This is a mechanism that shares the burden of environmental management of our shared Caribbean Sea. This is a mechanism which is anchored by UNEP, and we will send out the respective details, but it is something that puts Jamaica in a leadership position to manage a lot of the issues that face Caribbean nations. We also had the opportunity to join and sign the Ocean Acidification Alliance. This is an alliance of scientists that are specifically focused on the issue of ocean acidification, which is critical to the health of our coral reefs, which is critical to the health of our reefs, which is critical to fisheries and indeed to tourism. We also joined what is called the Action in Blue Regional Network, which is focused on coordinating the protection of 30% of the Caribbean Sea. That is something that Jamaica would have lobbied for from as far back as 2015, when Jamaica joined what is called the High Ambition Coalition for Nature, which led the way in calling for 30% protection of our marine environment. And finally, Jamaica also joined what is called the Mangrove Breakthrough, which is managed by an alliance which is chaired by Colombia and Jamaica in understanding its need for support in protecting its mangroves, especially along the south coast where we are exposed to heavy storm surge in times of storms and have low coastal defenses, has joined this breakthrough and will be working with partner nations and institutions to ensure that we step up our work in mangrove protection and indeed restoration. While there, I also had the benefit of a bilateral meeting with the Green Climate Fund. And to note, they're also here currently in Jamaica for a technical mission. And while there, it was announced that Jamaica was approved for an additional $2.1 million grant being managed by the 5Cs, which is the CARICOM unit that manages climate change, to assist Jamaica with getting projects ready for submission for significant grant funding. This project, the specific name of it is the Strengthening of Jamaica's Climate Response Mechanism. But this works with the DBJ, the Ministry of Finance, the PIOJ, and indeed JSIF to ensure that we have projects which are ready that can be funded and we have the right projects queued up. So last week was a busy week for environmental action and indeed ocean action in Jamaica, and I thought it important just to give you that brief update this morning. I do have also the benefit, just for a few more minutes, I won't take up too much of your time, Minister Bartlett, ahead of your presentation, but I would like to spend a moment just to deal with 3 matters raised in the Parliament yesterday by the opposition spokesperson on water. The first one I noted covered in the media this morning was his claim that politics is being used for the distribution of water projects. That is abject nonsense. And that is easily provable, and I will read through some projects, and I'm sure you'll know the communities and know that they do not support in elections the government of the day. The first one, and I'm bringing it up here, is a project that will be funded by the Caribbean Development Bank. Jamaica will this year go to market for $5 billion of contracting services to do projects that include the areas of Agwater Vale and Jordan Run. Now that water system will serve all of Central St. Mary and Southeast St. Mary, which currently sit on the opposition benches by way of members of parliament. We will also, in that project, be doing work in Mason Hall. We'll be doing work in Albert Town and Ulster Springs, Southern Trelawney. But we will also be developing a major system in Union, in Balaclava, in Northeast St. Elizabeth, which also sits with the opposition. We'll be developing the Port Morant Erie Castle water system in Eastern St. Thomas, which doesn't sit with the government of the day. And we'll be developing the Green Park water system, which is a system that connects both Northwest, Northeast, and yes, Southeast St. Anne, which is the only constituency that has never sat with this current administration. So yes, we are developing a lot of water systems, but the projects are equally shared. The point was made around the number of capital projects, but it left out a critical element. The two largest capital projects underway in the water sector benefit all Jamaicans. They're nation-building projects. The first is the Western Resilience Project, which was a source of much discussion. That project, you'll recall, will see a pipeline run from Martha Brae all the way to the opposition spokesperson's constituency in Western Westmoreland. That will connect with a major distribution main, 2 water treatment plants. One at Great River, which is on the boundary of Hanover Eastern and, of course, the western side of St. James, and the other, which is the Martha Brae treatment plant. Now, the last time I checked the budget, we are spending $11 billion this year on this project. The last time I looked at the map, that pipeline will run through Eastern Hanover, Western Hanover, and Western Westmoreland. I can't imagine how such a ludicrous statement could be made when $11 billion is being spent and 3 of the constituencies that will benefit the most are indeed held by the opposition. It's nonsense, and it should be rebuffed as such. The other point which was raised, which needs to be addressed, was that we should re-look at the Western Resilience Water Project because there were sufficient sources in Westmoreland, being the Roaring River and the Carburetor River. The numbers quoted are accurate. Those are 2 of Jamaica's most productive water sources. But at the beginning of the presentation, it was said that what Jamaica needed was an integrated set of water systems, not systems set up individually. This project actually does that. So I'm happy to see that he actually supports what we're trying to achieve. This project interlinks the water systems, certainly this phase, of Logwood in Western Hanover, of Great River in Eastern Hanover, and goes as far as integrating the supply from Martha Brae. So he called for exactly what we are doing. But he left out, in mentioning the Roaring River supply, that a subset of this project, which is phase 2, will see the development of a water treatment plant in Roaring River, which will supply Savlamar, and we'll see from the southwest end of the island the interconnection, and you're starting to build your ring road of sorts of pipes coming around the tip of the island. So you'll be interconnecting water systems as far as White River on the boundary of St. Mary, St. Anne. You'll be building a new water treatment plant at Rio Bueno to facilitate the continued growth in northern Trelawney. You'll be interconnecting those systems from White River, Rio Bueno, Martha Brae, Great River, all the way to Roaring River. That's exactly what we're doing. The population currently and level of industrial activity, whether service-based in tourism or for development, would not justify an additional water treatment plant at the Carburetor River. You simply don't have enough consumers of same when we have completed this project to develop another water plant, treatment plant. What is needed in Westmoreland and Hanover, and is needed right across the country, is indeed significant upgrades of our distribution system. Our line losses, as is reported by the OU, are still hover in the range of 70%. It is why, as I have announced here on multiple occasions, we have gone to market for a national non-revenue water partner. And the World Bank is consulting with us on this project and assisting with the evaluation of our bidders. And we expect to appoint a contractor later this year. So, no, the project does not need further review. The project was endorsed by other things said by the member yesterday, and we are certain that what we are doing is indeed in the best interest of Western Jamaica with this water distribution main upgrade, with the upgrade of 2 water treatment plants at Martha Brae and Great River, and yes, with the construction of 2 new water treatment plants, one which will be at Roaring River, the other which will be at Rio Bueno. The final point that I'm addressing this morning was the call for the merger of NWC, NIC, Rural Water Supply Limited, and the Water Resources Authority. I would encourage anyone reporting on this to take a glance at the legislation associated with NWC and the legislation associated with the Water Resources Authority. If you understand the function of the Water Resources Authority, you understand that it is both a monitoring agency from a scientific perspective that evaluates the health of our water sources, but it's also a regulator. I am at pains to understand how a regulator could merge with a utility. If you figure it out, I would be happy to have a discussion with you, because it is simply not possible from my understanding. The other issue to be understood is that the NIC is in charge of irrigation. It distributes water through canals, untreated water. Merging an institution that is in charge of potable water and wastewater management with an institution that is in charge of distributing untreated water creates its own hazards, and there are models of failure in other countries, which is the reason why Jamaica has kept them apart. The other entity is Rural Water Supply Limited. Rural Water Supply Limited, from your understanding, is the engineering core that is responsible for social water in this country, meaning it develops water systems that are then handed over to the municipalities that have no intent, no possibility of cost recovery. Meaning you build water catchment systems in districts that are outside of the utility footprint, or in some cases cannot afford to connect to the utility and pay a fee, so that you facilitate water access as this country has committed to providing to all of its citizens. So it is not a utility. If you figure out how to merge them, I'm open to the discussion. But I think the call was hollow and lacked intellectual rigor. Ladies and gentlemen, those are my brief remarks this morning. And if there are any questions from members of the media, they can reach out to me and my team, and we'll respond throughout the course of the day. I do have to leave. And of course, I hate leaving when Minister Bartlett is presenting, so I'll be watching on YouTube. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister Samuda. And for the young people who are here, you understand why I love having him. He's a very good minister. He understands his portfolio very well, and he can articulate it really, really well, and he can counter what others have to say in terms of critique. And that's really what you want to have in a minister, someone with that kind of intellectual rigor. And I guess we all learned it from the next guest that we have, the one that we are so happy about having here at PostCab. His role is not a domestic role. His role is to bring the tourists to Jamaica. And he has done fantastic at that. So he's all over the world selling this country. And for me, it's an honor to be able to introduce him here at Post Cabinet so that he can talk to Jamaica again about all the wonderful things that he and his team have been doing. So please welcome the Honorable Ed Bartlett.
Thank you so much, Minister Dr. Dana Morrison, and the convener of these very valuable post-cabinet sessions. that bring clarity to many issues and elucidate so much that might have been obscured by the very term she used, the rigors of cabinet deliberations, which are sometimes very long and extended and long-winded. But very committed to the purpose, and indeed, one thing we can assure is that the cabinet spends an enormous amount of time and effort and energy to ensure that we get it right. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak further on the presentation that I made yesterday with regards to the tourism economy that we are creating and the structures that are critical to enabling a tourism economy to emerge, relating primarily to the human capital development necessities, the physical infrastructure that is required in terms of enabling carrying capacity to secure that when visitors do come to the island, they feel safe, secure, and the process of their movement around the island is as seamless as possible. And then to ensure that there is a community space that enables for this level of safety and security as well. And how do we build out? What kind of architecture is required to build out the community spaces? And how do we enable communities themselves to become deeply ingrained in the tourism value chain to ensure that the retention of the earnings of tourism are in the economy in full and certainly reflected in the communities by way of their own enrichment. The building out of the human capital development side is central, and we spend a lot of time and energy on that. We recognize that tourism, by its very nature, does have a high quotient of unskilled, semi-skilled labor, so that the workforce, the current workforce of tourism, tend to reflect the lower value-added end of the remuneration structure. And what do we do to change that? And it's a very important part of what creating a tourism economy is all about. And to do that is based on two critical things. One, to create merit within a system of meritocracy, to enable the worker to be sufficiently qualified, certified, and competent, so that that level of certification can result in classification and then remuneration in relation to classification. And so we've been working on that. We established the Jamaica Center for Tourism Innovation in 2017, which is a pathway certification facility that enables competent workers who are not certified to become certified on the job. And we've linked with the American Hotel and Lodging Institute and the American Culinary Foundation to enable the quality of those certifications to be able to have mobility, and not just portability, but also mobility, to enable our workers to move from any part of the world with stackable credentials so that they can stand on their own and be remunerated accordingly. And then we have to think about the whole labor market arrangements. And how do we influence that to change the way that people feel about their jobs in the industry, how secure they feel, how committed they are, and the level of confidence and trust that they will have. And so we looked at the ecosystem around and how do we provide, firstly, social security. And we developed a world-class, one-of-a-kind tourism workers' pension scheme. And in 2.5 years, we have had 10,548 members, and we are now tipping 6 billion Jamaican dollars in savings by the workers. And this is expanding, and it will one day will be the largest pool of affordable capital in Jamaica to enable investment in infrastructure and many other areas for us to build schools, hospitals, and other such things. The second area after is housing. And we spend a lot of time working through that. The Tourism Enhancement Fund started that process by providing the first $1 billion for infrastructure development in unregulated communities. There's another colloquial expression for that, which we don't use very regularly in tourism. It's an S word, and we don't use it very much. But these are communities where the occupants and the personnel within those areas are workers of the tourism industry. But the conditions under which they live are inimical to a better appreciation of the palatial settings within which they work. And so we had to create some opportunity to bring the two closer together. And so we started out with Bel Air in St. Ann and White Hall, in Negril, and Grange Pen in St. James. We also did Lilliput, we did Flanker, we did Norwood. And all those areas we went in, first of all, to create a better road network, and in some instances, water supplies and electricity. But perhaps the best and most significant statement that we've made in this regard is the Grange Pen development, where we actually bought 250 acres of brownfield and greenfield areas from FinSAC, the Tourism Enhancement Fund, and we have spent over $1 billion to rehabilitate the brownfield areas. It's 95% completed now, and what we have done is to put in roads in everywhere, electricity in every corner, water supplies, and sewage arrangements. And finally, to provide 535 titles for the 535 families that are in that area. So we are going beyond that now. In the greenfield area, where there are 98 acres, we're building 1,500 houses through HAJ, and they have completed a JV with Czech. And we're expecting to break ground for that in September, 1,500 houses for the workers of the tourism industry. Just a little beyond that at Banquet Hall, NHT has already broken ground, and the work has started for 1,500 houses also within that area. So the workers were looking at new housing arrangements for about 3,000 in total, but we are requiring every single investor who comes to Jamaica and builds hotels larger than 500 rooms must have a housing component for the workers. And so far, we have seen the hoteliers responding well. Palladium is building 1,000 more suites, and they're building 600 units for the workers. Princess has already built a facility for 500 workers. Excellence is adding 100 new units, and a number of new investors have actually purchased land already. The Hard Rock, colloquially called Hard Rock, but it's really Unico, they have bought lands for housing. Palladium, Moon Palace, which is also, they have also bought lands. Iberia Star, they bought lands. So we are seeing that this whole idea of enabling a worker environment that is more conducive to high levels of productivity and greater security of the worker is emerging. So what is intended, I will speak about in a minute when I get into Tourism 3.0, because the outcomes of which I spoke earlier were in the second phase of tourism development. The first phase, as I indicated yesterday, was, let's say, 1955, when the Tourist Board Act was promulgated and we established the Jamaica Tourist Board as the central organizing unit for tourism development in the country. And then we started with some of the pioneers like Abe Issa and John Pringle and so on, and they did marvelously well to establish Jamaica, then as the playground, as they call it, for the rich and the famous. But that was good, and it set the stage and created brand Jamaica, in a sense, and made the people of the world recognize that tourism can happen in Jamaica. Well, after the 80s, because tourism began to grow, and we reached, I think, 227,000 stopover arrivals in 1962. And then we started to make tourism now a driving force for job creation and employment. But we had a setback in the 70s, and that whole process was derailed a bit. We came back in the 80s with energy and strength, with establishing tourism for the first time as a ministry under the leadership of Anthony Abrahams, who was the first minister of tourism properly in Jamaica's history. And then the late Honorable Hugh Hart became the second minister of tourism. And tourism really took off in the 80s. It continued in the 90s, and in the 90s into early 2000, we saw massive expansion in the tourism, particularly in terms of inventory. New hotels came. We saw the expansion of the all-inclusive concept in a big way. And then we established institutional arrangements to support this. The TPDCO was established. The Tourism Enhancement Fund was established. And we saw also that JAMVAC took on some energy as a driving force for airlift security in the country. So all of that took us into an era when we established KPIs like 5 by 5 by 5, and that we achieved in the main, notwithstanding the disruptions of COVID, which brought tourism to zero, and we grew after that exponentially, and then came Beryl, and then now Melissa, and with all of those disruptions, plus the geopolitical disruptions that are around, wars and other types of health disruptions that we've had, notwithstanding that, we made $4.7 billion US in earnings, 4.3 million in visitor arrival within that period of 5 years. So that we have become a 4 billion destination. But the time has come for us to move beyond that. And that segment we called Tourism 2.0. The time has come now for us to move into another space. We have 20,000 new rooms to be built over the next 10 years. We've actually started the construction of that already. Just in the Lilliput Rose Hall area of St. James, there will be 6,000 new rooms. 2-3 casinos that will be within this space from Green Island to Trelawney. Expansion in terms of villas and apartments. The emergence of the sharing economy has created a new dimension to accommodation for visitors across Jamaica. Today, the so-called Airbnb, as is referred to, constitutes some 30% of all the visitors who come to Jamaica, with a large portion of the foreign exchange generation being ascribed to them. So managing and enabling the development of all of these in the future has to be considered. We want to look at now how to treat with the new workforce that is going to emerge as a result of technology, AI, and all the cognitive systems that are now influencing the experiences of tourism and the arrangements around tourism. So we have to think through, how do we create the capacity of our people to respond to these new developments, and not just that, but to grow and to enable the economic development of our country. And so Tourism 3.0 seeks to bring all of that into focus under a new set of KPIs of 10 by 10 by 10, meaning to achieve 10 million visitors, earn $10 billion over the next 10 years. And because we did 5 by 5 by 5, we think we have the credibility to go to 10 by 10 by 10, because we have now the inventory that will allow for that. The airlift arrangements have been phenomenal in terms of how Jamaica has become connected with destinations all around. We are now looking at new markets. We're diversifying extensively. The South America has become a very, very powerful new frontier for tourism for us. Already we have the US, which is very strong, Canada, which is very strong, the UK, that is very strong. Now South America is taking on the next strength, and then we move beyond that to the Middle East, to Asia. India in particular has an enormous capacity for tourism, outbound tourism. We see that they have over 100 million middle class now capable of moving around, and they spend. That's the important thing. They have large weddings, and they spend a long time when they come, so that's very important for us. So what am I indicating to you, therefore, is that the need then for a new architecture is evident. And that is going to be realized by some 10 pillars that we have established. And yesterday I spoke a bit about them. And today I want to just quickly reiterate, because I think it is important that we recognize the new architecture that is being developed around tourism and the significance of enabling us to be able to drive the level of support that is required in this regard. Firstly, is to build out your marketing architecture. Marketing is our business. That's what we do. And that the Jamaica Tourist Board is fully responsible for. And Donovan and his team have gone out to create the frame for that already. I mentioned to you about South America, about India, about the Middle East, and also about Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe is a big area that we have to look at. So market diversification is the number one pillar. The second is cruise access and visitor conversion. And so far, we have recovered fairly well with cruise. This year we're expecting 1.5 million cruise passengers, which is very close to our best ever. The discussions, and I say no more than that for this time, the discussion with our partners is angling towards a cruise expansion and development in Jamaica that will be unprecedented. And when I mentioned the 10 by 10, cruise is going to play a big role in enabling that 10 million visitors to come to Jamaica. We'll have more to say on that. Then the issue of maritime tourism is going to be very seriously engaged by us. With NARA, we plan to build out Lucy as the maritime tourism center with pleasure boats and yachting, and very extensive work is being done on that. The MAJ, Maritime Association of Jamaica, Authority of Jamaica, is working with us in terms of that build-out. The third one is destination upgrading and climate-resilient infrastructure. And here we are focusing on our townships, building out beach attractions, public spaces, drainage, signage, sanitation, lighting, digital system, environmental assets, and also to ensure that the towns, we're working with NARA in this regard, and they're going to play a big role, NARA, in enabling the product, the tourism product, to take on a new life. And one of the big things that we're trying to do is to move the tourism assets further inland for resilience, so that we'll be building more in parishes. We will be identifying what are the special assets in each parish, and then to build out the capabilities in those parishes to be able to attract more visitors, so that the coastlines are going to be as low density tourism as possible. We have already missed the boat in part with that, with the mega structures that we have, particularly along the north coast. But certainly the south coast, which is a new frontier for development, will see less density and more activity in the inner parishes and the rural communities. The fourth pillar will be the establishment of the local first and economic retention. Now, local first is the principle of enabling capacity of our people, Jamaicans, to drive the supply side of tourism and to strengthen their ownership of the industry. The current situation is where the equity balance is something like 70-30 in favor of foreign investment. Tourism 3.0 envisages a 60-40 distribution, so that at least 40% own locally. And if we own 40% of a $10 billion US dollar activity, you understand where we're going in terms of the retention of the tourism dollar in our space. The local first policy is now being finalized. The cabinet has already approved the concept notes and given instruction for, is it the green or white paper, PS? For the policy development to be done, and that Minister Tova Hamilton is responsible for completing that. She's going to be doing extensive consultation with stakeholders across the island to ensure that this policy embraces all of our key players and does provide the basis for the capacity building of our local is critical, because we talk about importing and stop importing. But we can't stop importing if we don't have the capacity to supply. And we have not had that culture. We have a culture of samples. We have great samples, lovely samples. When we have Christmas in July and so on, we see wonderful samples of products and so on. But we need to scale up. And so we need to bring investors into the play. We need to bring our bankers into the business. The whole capital market has to converge around the building out of the supply side of tourism. So we are going to be establishing for the first time, and this now is on leg 5, the Tourism Logistics Supply Center. And this is going to be in a special economic zone, so that what will happen is that the local players as well as international players will have a chance to develop not just a warehousing facility for goods and services, but now to deal with procurement, to deal with packaging, to deal with freight and insurance and all that is necessary to have goods secure in Jamaica for the tourism industry, and also to be able to nearshore to other islands in the Caribbean and in the region as a whole. So in discussions with the Caribbean Tourism Organization and the IDB and some of our international partners, there is an understanding that the need for logistics supplies center is not just a Jamaican need, it's a regional need. And Jamaica has been asked to spearhead that, and I'm chairing the subcommittee, the ministerial subcommittee on the supply side for tourism in the region, and already it is agreed that the first logistics center will be established here in Jamaica in our special economic zone. So we're excited about that as a prospect. What it will do is to bring agriculture and manufacturing and the whole industrial side, creative industries and so on, all together so that we can provide the supplies that is needed, reducing the leakage of foreign exchange generated by tourism, not just in Jamaica, but in the region. The sixth one, of course, is the future-ready worker and human capital development. I spoke extensively about that earlier on, so I just want you to know that it is the sixth pillar. The seventh pillar, the seventh pillar is technology. Is about now creating credentials that build progressively to certify real competence and unlock new employment and advancement opportunities across the sector. The objective is not technology for technology's sake, as we said. The objective is to better service, stronger confidence, and higher employability and greater upward mobility for the Jamaican workers. Our housekeepers, for example, must know that technology can improve workflow and safety. That concierge must know that AI can support faster information, but cannot replace the warm Jamaican hospitality. We want our workers and our partners all to be conversant with the cognitive systems, to manipulate them and to utilize them for greater efficiencies, so that Jamaica's tourism can be, those three S's again, safe, secure, and seamless. One of the things that we've led the region in technology is access to our ports of call, where we are the first country in the Caribbean to have facial recognition at the airport. And in addition to all of that, we have these e-gates that allow for seamlessness as you move through. So we're moving to enable a wider perspective. I'm closing at that point because we will have an opportunity to talk about the enabling legislations that will constitute the next 3 pillars of the 10 that we're talking about. We'll be establishing the Jamaicas, for the first time, we'll be establishing a new authority for tourism. And that will be resulting from the repealing of the Jamaica Tourist Board Act and also the River Rafting Act, and then to create the new Tourism Authority Act and to establish the Tourism Authority. Now, the Tourism Authority is not just about creating another layer of bureaucracy. It is about creating the institutional backbone required to govern a modern tourism industry. Tourism has outgrown the old administrative arrangements under which marketing, regulation, licensing, inspection, compliance, product development, destination assurance, and licensing fell. We now need to build a new architecture that will respond to the expanded tourism that we're talking about and the tourism economy that we're anticipating. Tourist Board, the JTB, has been sort of saddled with dealing with licensing and giving permission for hotels to operate, while it is now burdened with creating this new architecture for marketing. We're now looking at a kind of expansion of outbound market that are larger than we have ever thought. When we had Tourism 1.0 and Tourism 2.0, we were operating within a narrow space. Now we're looking at the entire world. And so the JTB, having a primary responsibility of marketing, has their hand full with getting the visitors here and to enable the promise that we make to the visitor to be secured. The TPDCO is now charged with destination assurance, which is to ensure that the product is at the quality and standards, and to ensure that the public spaces are in good shape and public order is maintained, to deal with the issues of harassment and so on. And the Tourism Enhancement Fund is now responsible not to be the ATM of tourism, as was anticipated by some, but is now to look at the business of human capital development, training, and the innovation and the management of the whole technological driven tourism that we're anticipating. And of course, JAMVAC is fully now charged with cruise, fully responsible to build out the cruise architecture that we spoke here. Therefore, you need to have a separate entity that deals now with regulation, legislation, and deal with the whole business of ensuring standards and quality control, and also to make sure that the promise that we made in the market is supported fully here with a framework of rules and regulations that guide how we operate. So what we're saying then is a new tourism will emerge with a new driving purpose, with a new regulatory and legislative framework, and with a new mindset for service driven by the technological advancements of our time, and supported by a community development strategy that will see tourism being an inclusive industry and moving from what we had called an extractive industry to now be an extracting industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Bartlett. It is wonderful to have you here. Always love having you with the young people here, always able to hear from one of our very, very important ministers. And you notice he's laying out a vision for the future. We've done a lot in tourism. He's achieved a lot. The 5x5 was something that was difficult, looked very difficult and daunting. And he's been able to get it to happen. And now he's not stopping there. He could just stop and celebrate. Look at where we are. No, he's now pushing the envelope even more. And I think that's what I want my young people to learn from this and from being here today. So even when you set yourself a really difficult goal and you get there, you now set another one. And that's how we develop and grow as a country. We continue pushing the envelope and continue pushing for more and more. And for those of you who don't know, and especially for the young people and those at home who are watching us, just reminding you that Minister Bartlett first became Minister of Tourism in 2007. But he was also this. He did PostCap. He was Minister of Information before. Did you all know that? He was Information, Broadcasting and Culture. He was also Minister of Youth, Sports and Community Development. So he has other things that he did before that all paved the way. And I said culture too, yeah, and culture. That paved the way for him to be such an amazing Minister of Tourism. And, you know, we're so very happy to have him here. And he hasn't just done, you know, wonderful things for Jamaica, but this notion of resilience in tourism, and we now talk about it a lot in education too. But tourism resilience, that whole concept was coined by our minister. And he took it around the world, and the entire world has bought into it. He also set up global tourism resilience and crisis management centers around the world. So he's not just, you know, an icon in Jamaica. He's a global icon in terms of tourism. And that's what I want you to be striving for, to be really world known and to put Jamaica on the map in terms of intellectual rigor to understanding, coining new concepts, and developing a way of looking at these concepts. And that's why I'm happy this morning, because I get to have the Honorable Ed Bartlett here. I usually get him at lunchtime on a cabinet day. I usually sit beside him for lunch. I learned a lot just sitting beside him and eating beside him. And so it's nice to have him here this morning and for you to get to hear that vision of tourism. We've gone far, but we feel we can go even further. And the minister has laid out a plan. He told you about the rooms. It's not an empty plan. 20,000 new rooms, and these are rooms that are ongoing. They're being built. When you go down to Montego Bay, you see them coming out of the ground. And he also spoke about the improved airlifts. He's the one that's been championing a lot of that. And also rooms for the workers. That is so important. The tourism workers, they're integral to this entire process. And we are focusing as an administration on making sure that they have good housing so they're not left out of this entire development. And that also includes the pension program that was pioneered by Minister Bartlett too, so that our tourism workers don't work for years and then have no pension. So, Minister Bartlett, you can see I'm happy to have you. And it's good to have you here. It was good to have Minister Samuda, and we're now open up for questions. You don't usually have Minister Bartlett, so let's get started with questions from the media.
Jonelle Lawrence, Observer. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes. Minister Bartlett, how will tourism workers qualify for these new housing solutions that you have said will be built? And what assurances can you give that the program will be accessible to the average worker in the sector?
Right. So yesterday I mentioned that we are in discussion with some of our mortgage houses on the matter of what we call patient mortgage, which is an interesting concept. It's not very prevalent around, but it's something we're examining to enable our workers who, at the moment, are at the lower end of the income scales to be able to afford the houses that are being built. The other thing is the type of units that are going to be built. In the case of the 1,500 units from Grange Pen, we're going to have them in three different categories. One will be like a starter home with one bedroom, and the second will be a 2-bedroom, and of course the next is a 3-bedroom. So there will be 960 of the 1-bedroom types. So that will enable our workers to afford more of it. And that kind of structure is the way forward in building these whole houses for workers. But it is not going to be the feature throughout because of what I just outlined to you in terms of the capacity building and how we want to certify and classify workers in the industry so their remuneration can change. It's to create a whole new ecosystem around the labor market for tourism workers.
Thank you. Any on this side?
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Here is your nationwide news here. Question to Minister Bartlett. Your opposition counterpart during her sectoral presentation, Andrea Perkis, highlighted two areas that you did speak on a bit during your presentation a while ago that I'd like you to go more into detail on. She mentioned cruise shipping as a part of the tourism sector, saying that our market share has dipped. And she was also raising the issue of transportation, saying that she believes that JUTA and transportation entities such as those have been kind of sidelined by in-house transportation being brought in by some hoteliers. How do you respond to those two claims?
Well, firstly, as a rule, I don't respond. I act and proact. And if you listen to how we have sought to put those concerns to rest, we have been deliberate in terms of discussing with you the expansion of cruise and the fact that cruise recovery will have 1.5 million cruise. The best Jamaica has done is 1.6 million in 2017 or something like that. And so any informed analysis of cruise would speak to the heavy disruption that cruise has suffered since COVID and the change that has also taken place. So if you even understand a little bit about the cruise industry, you would appreciate that Jamaica's Western Caribbean itinerary has been totally disrupted by Cayman not having a port that can accommodate the size vessels that we have coming to us in Falmouth. That Labradee, which was the next one in Haiti, is also not available because of crime and other conditions in Haiti. So Jamaica is like a port on its own trying to survive. And so for us to have 1.1 million visitors last year was magnificent. So, statistics you can lie with, you can play with statistics. But it shows a bit of perhaps naivety or a little greenness maybe, and we understand that. The other issue in relation to the ground transportation. The ground transportation is need for a good overhaul. And in Tourism 3.0, we are going to look at the ground transportation because one of the areas that Local First is going to focus heavy on because it is an area over which Jamaicans have comparative and competitive advantage if dealt with properly. The system as it stands now, and our Minister of State, Tova Hamilton, will have that as part of her responsibility as well, to work through and to sit with these players, because the expansion of the ground transportation has been phenomenal in the last 10 years. When I became minister first, there were just about 2,000 licensed operators. It's now 6,000. So consider how that structure is. And the problem with it is that we don't have companies that are operating per se. We have individuals. And the hotels have a difficulty trying to make a contract with 6,000 individuals. So part of what we need to look at is how to structure the ground transportation arrangement so that it is possible for contracts to be developed and carried through properly. And I agree that Local First is going to speak to much of the anomalies that now exists in the ground transportation system.
Thank you. And my second question would be to both of you, I guess. How have well, I shouldn't even say preparations, because the hurricane season has begun. How would you gauge where your sectors are right now in terms of preparing for a potential disaster?
And I really should have said that when I started my comments. So thanks for the question. Currently, we are at 80% of our inventory. We have about 11 hotels that are to come back on stream, and they are beginning to come in a structured way starting July. So July we'll have a first set coming back, then August, September, October, and finally December and what we call the first quarter of 2027. So by the first quarter of 27, meaning the latest February of next year, all the hotels that were out will be back, except Catalonia, which was extensively damaged. And what they are doing is literally to rebuild the hotel and to add 270 new rooms. So in 2028, when Catalonia comes back, it will be virtually a brand new, bigger and better hotel. In the meantime, Unico, the newest hotel to be constructed, will be ready for December 15. When you pass there at Lilliput, you'll see the work is very, very well advanced. So that will make up for the gap that Catalonia would have provided. So we can say we'll be pretty much 100% back in terms of our inventory.
All right. We're not that lucky in education. We had over 400 schools that we're currently trying to fix at the same time. It is very difficult to fix all of them. During the summer when the students are out, the contractors will be working quite a bit to get our schools back. But because of the damage, some of the schools, the timeline is over a year in terms of rebuilding them. So we are obviously in the ministry having to pray a lot. But at the same time, we pray and we prepare. So we've had to be looking at our resilience plans. We're now being hailed around the world as one of the best education systems in terms of resilience. So no matter what's thrown at us, we pivot and we continue. But that takes preparation. It takes a lot of work. And so the ministry would have, made some adjustments to our resilience plans. Those are being rolled out. And in terms of the reconstruction for those schools that have been finished, there are new standards around the reconstruction of schools. So we have new building standards for schools. That makes it more resilient. So we know that those schools should not have any issues if there is a hurricane. But we continue. We have our learning kits. We have many different resources that we can use if there is disruption in the system. And that's really the posture we have to take, one of resilience and ready for whatever climate throws at us.
Observer, going back to the matter of the housing solutions, is there a specific criteria, let's say, for instance, like a salary threshold that has to be met in order for the tourism workers to qualify for one of the houses, or is it just a matter of, just solely being a tourism worker?
Just being a tourism worker. And if you earn 30% or more of your income from tourism, you qualify. So the craft entrepreneur can qualify. The Juta Jacal taximan who supplies tourism by way of transfers can qualify. You work at the airport and you're a red cap, you can qualify. Jamaica's tourism perhaps is the broadest of all industries in the world when it comes to worker benefits.
Okay. And going to, I know you'd have stated that you're moving towards we are moving towards a more resilient environment for the tourism sector. With regards to the hotels, we're in the hurricane season right now, or we're approaching it. is there any building standards or building codes that are being given to the hoteliers for them to say, build their hotels in a way that is resilient to natural disasters, let's say like one such as Hurricane Melissa?
Excellent question. And in fact, one would say that conventional wisdom would determine that the hurricane having come and hit you the way it did, you are going to build back better and stronger and more resilient. But insofar as the ministry itself giving a direction, we haven't done that. And perhaps that's something that TPDCO might want to take on, yes.
And follow us in education. All right. Well, thank you. It seems like there's one more. Okay. Yeah. There's another question.
Yes. Good that the students ask questions. Yes, very good.
Good morning. Jeremy Francis representing the UMONA Guild. My question to you, Minister, is in regards to Jamaica being recognized as a growing tourism leader. What advice would you give us as university students in terms of the emerging career fields due to Jamaica becoming a global tourism leader? What areas would you recommend us to pursue?
Right, excellent question. And you're at the right place. You're at the center of knowledge. And one of the things that I wanted to have said was that tourism is driven by ideas. And we spend a lot of time now in honing ideas, mining ideas, finding ideas, and then we bring them in and we incentivize ideas. We have a budget in TEF that actually deals with innovation, and we have established a tourism innovation incubator where young people like yourself with ideas but no financial backing, no collateral, can come in, put your ideas on the table, and then we offer you the opportunity to convert those ideas into meaningful and practical experiences and products. And then we allow you to either go off into working with another company that has a similar view as you, or we enable a startup through Exim Bank, where we have a portfolio for small and medium tourism enterprises. So I would say for you, focus heavily on the technologies and how the technologies are going to create greater efficiencies in the industry and creating new products and experiences, because that's what tourism is driven by, experiences. People travel all over the world to consume experiences at a price. So spend much of your time now looking at AI, yes, and how AI can make the difference in terms of our marketing. You can come up with some new tools for the JTB to be able to converse with visitors and to potential visitors all over the world and provide information transfer in real time. In fact, in nanotime, right? Because that's how fast. And then one final thing that I wanted to look at is the issue of reputational resilience. How do you help to protect the reputation of people as a result of misinformation, disinformation, fake news, deep fake? And now you don't know. Every time we go to the social media, we wonder, is it true? Is it real? And then anything and everything can be said about you and the destination. How do we manage that? And the cost of dealing with reputation damage is humongous. Donovan will tell you the millions that it costs us to deal with a false representation of our destination. We have something called travel advisories. You know them? And the travel advisories in many instances about a single section of the country, far removed sometimes from the center of tourism. But it defines the country. So we have now to develop. I've written a book on it actually, right? On destination, reputation, resilience. But it's something that I think we need to think deeply about, because we are the victim. And if you can't manage that process, recover from it, first of all, to identify it, to mitigate against it, to manage it when it hits you, to recover quickly, and then to take your reputation to another level. So it's a whole science now around it, and I want you to think it through as a student in the institutions where knowledge is critical to us. But the most important part of knowledge, as Minister of Education will tell you, is your ability to convert the knowledge into meaningful and practical things. I told my students that you cannot graduate until you innovate. And that's what must be at the heart of all of you students who are doing hospitality at university and elsewhere. Innovation, innovation, innovation.
Thank you. What a lovely answer. Good question. Oh, another one. Former Minister of Youth. I think you'd be happy to see the young people questioning their ministers.
Yes.
It's good morning, everyone. Nashe Baker from CMU. With the current projection for the growth of the tourism, maritime, and logistic industry, what pathways or initiative will be put in place to ensure internships for students studying within said sectors to allow them to hone and develop their skills? And with the high demand globally and regionally for graduates within these sectors, what measures are the ministry exploring to retain our graduates and local talent?
Well, Tourism 3.0 is speaking to that because, well, let me say you're lucky, CMU, because you have a graduate from tourism as your president. Professor Spencer worked with me as Dr. Spencer, and he left me as Professor Spencer. So we spoke a bit about the maritime tourism, and you will feature very heavily, especially with the kind of discussions we are now having with our cruise partners in relation to the development of cruise in Jamaica. We're going to be having new ports established. Prime Minister indicated that on a map when he spoke in Parliament where these new ports are going to be. And certainly with Lucy being designated as a maritime tourism center for the country, you from CMU will no doubt have a good role to play there.
All right, we'll take the last two questions now.
Morning, everyone. Mahir Stewart, Nationwide News again. Question to Minister Morris Dixon. 2 days ago, we were here. You told us that there's going to be a committee in place at some point focused on the education of boys. With that said, what's your reaction to the fact that 7 of the top 10 performing PEP students are indeed boys?
Happy
All
about
right.
that.
So, again, thank you for asking that question so that I can bask in the happiness of our children who did so very well in PEP, and especially those in the West. As you saw, many of the children, a third of those who did PEP, were affected severely by Hurricane Melissa. And for them to be so resilient and to do so well says so much about them, about their parents, their teachers, the school community. Our boys, generally, when we look on the data, same for PEP and for CSEC and CAPE, we see the fact that our boys are performing below the level of our girls. We see it in the tertiary institutions. When you go into the classroom, you see more girls than you see boys. It is very important that we understand this issue and to actually treat with it. As I said earlier this week, you cannot have a successful country with one gender moving and the other not. Mm-hmm. Both have to be rising together. And so that's why we're putting together the Boys Committee. I'm happy that I saw the top 7 of the top 10 being boys. That's amazing, and that is really good. But what that tells us is that our boys can achieve at the level of the girls. And we have to put in place programs across the board that deal with this. We have some schools that are trying different innovations. They're structuring the classroom differently, doing more breaks. You have some schools that have actually split boys and girls during the PEP years. Some of them are seeing results. We have to study those results more. But we also are doing it very scientific. In the ministry, we use data to move forward. And that's why the big event that we're doing in November with the rest of the Caribbean ministers of education and UNESCO is important, because across the Caribbean, this is a phenomenon that we see with the boys underperforming the girls. But we believe that it's something that we can fix, and we're going to look at global studies to look at how we can deal with it here. It's an interesting problem to have, because around the rest of the world, it's an issue with girls having access to education and social mobility. But in our country, we see it, women dominate management posts. We're leaders in women in management in the world. So we've done some good things. Now we have to turn our eyes to making sure that our boys feel as empowered. And so congratulations to those 7 boys who are doing so wonderful and at the top. And, you know, we just have to continue to make it happen and use it as an example that our boys can achieve really big things too. We just need to support them.
Last two.
Yes.
Annie Osborne from Jamaica Observer.
Sure.
Minister Bartlett, just now you mentioned taking attractions inland as your plan, as a part of your plan for resilience. I was wondering if you anticipate any challenges with taking inside tourism attractions, taking inland tourism attractions. When many tourists probably think of Jamaica, they think of beaches, white sandy beaches. So do you anticipate any challenges as such? And if you do, what would you do to counter that?
Right. So we made the point of the diversification away from the coastal areas where there is vulnerability. But most of Jamaica's real attraction, the geophysical features, are in the rural areas. And so we're developing a strong community tourism policy that you'll hear more about. As a matter of fact, David Dobson is here, who is the big mind behind that in our ministry. So through Spruce Up on the Corner, which is a program that we have about funding small community projects, and we've funded some 417 community projects across Jamaica already, and spent a little over $1 billion on it. So what will happen, because Jamaica, and here I'm going back to NARA, because I'm really excited about the prospect of NARA really making a change in terms of our infrastructure in the country. The road networks that are being contemplated will now connect more of rural Jamaica to our entrepôts. That is the airport in Montego Bay, the airport in Kingston, and a new airport that is going to be built at Vernon Field in Clarendon. So all of that will enable greater access into the deep rural areas. We're doing bypass roads, which would remove the bottleneck from some of the coastal areas and open new areas in rural Jamaica so that development can take place. So you would see that because we're not an enormously large country, you're going to have I would say, an hour and a half or so distance in time between airports and almost any area of Jamaica. From here going to the southeastern side, into St. Thomas, into Portland, with the road system that we have now, an hour and a half from the airport. From here going to Ocho Rios, across the north-south highway, an hour and a half. From Ocho Rios to Montego Bay, an hour and a half. That's what we're talking about. So that will enable us, the visitors, to have access to all of the attractions anywhere in Jamaica that they are.
All right. And if I can just add, usually every time I do post-cab, Minister, I always remind people of the reduction in crime. So everything is integrated.
Yes.
As a country, all that effort we have put into bringing crime down is going to be beneficial on the tourism side, because all this investment in the communities is facilitated by lower crime, and so people can have that greater perception of safety. So everything matches back. We're working quite holistically as a government.
Very well said. Minister, I just wanted to add this because you mentioned the security. Jamaica has had the unfortunate reality of being classified in these travel advisories in very unfavorable ways. And the big one that concerns us most is what we call the ABC countries, the ones that come from America, Great Britain, and Canada. And I'm very proud to tell you that the latest version of the travel advisory from the U.S. is have Jamaica at Category 2, which is the next best position to be in globally. But they have revised the narrative, eliminating many of the places that previously would have been on the list of no-goes for American visitors. And the reason for that is the strong improvement in visitor safety resulting from the massive reduction, the 40-odd% reduction in crime in Jamaica. So see the correlation between crime and the perception of the destination as being safe and secure. And that perception is reflected practically, because a travel advisory is sometimes the Bible that a visitor uses to determine which destination to go. So I thank you for mentioning that, so I can make the point that continuing this crime reduction will inure to a greater sense of reputational integrity for Destination Jamaica.
Thank you. And we'll go to our last question from Roots FM.
Good morning, everyone. Adiri Truth from Roots 96.1 FM. My question is to Minister Morris Dixon. With PEP placements being released, for parents who may have questions or concerns about their child's placements, what guidance can you offer? And can you say whether there are avenues for them to seek any clarification or assistance?
All right, sure. Thank you for that question. And, I turned off my phone after results came out. But then when I turned it on, the messages came through. So I did have some parents who were asking about the schools that their children would be going to. And that's normal. That happens every year. That we go through it as a ministry. What we'd say to parents is the new report gives a lot of information where your child is. It tells you what they're struggling with, what they need assistance with. Go through that report first. Talk about it with the child's teacher. We also have regional offices. There are 7 regional offices. You can go to any of our regional offices. You can sit with our regional team. They'll go through it with you. I know there are persons who are requesting transfers, those are based on the schools. That's school level transfers, and persons are able to do that. There are very limited spots though from there. But if you want to understand what it means for your child and you want to understand that paper that you get in more detail, please reach out to our regional offices. We are more than happy to help you to understand it even better. But the children did better, right?
Yes.
So the competition to get
Yes.
to all of the schools that all of you dream of going to has gotten even stronger. What would get you into, let me pick a school, St. George's College. A few years ago, you need a higher score now. That's how good the students are doing, and our primary school students are also doing superb. They are doing very well, and so, you know, that competition is there, but we're here to explain to parents and to walk with them on this journey.
Right.
Thank you.
I want to say one little thing on that. Minister Dana is going to be the guest speaker for my 30th anniversary of the PEP Awards in my constituency on the 10th of July. Every year we do it for the last 30 years. And this year we have a little over 100 students from 14 schools in the constituency that are high achievers, not just that they are placed, but we have something called a 90s club and an 80s club. So you only get awards from me if you're in the 80s club and the 90s club. And we have over 100 this year. So I just thought I'd do that little bit.
I don't see it in the diary yet, but Crystal and Blake are here, so I figure they'll figure something out. But that's another thing for the young people, and another reason why I really admire Minister Bartlett. When you talk to him one night after an event, I had the pleasure of having dinner with him, and I said to him, "What do you want your legacy to be?" And he said, "Educating the people in my community." He spends so much time and effort on education. He focuses on scholarships for people in his constituency. He has introduced me to attorneys and doctors who came from his constituency and who he supported through school. And he truly understands that our development really rests in people. And that's one of the many reasons why I admire you so much, Minister.
That's my life.
And that will be definitely your legacy. I see them all over the place and they say, you know, I was one of his scholarship students, and that's as great a legacy as any. So thank you, Minister. Thank you for being here. You're always welcome to come to Post Cab.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And so, as always, we are ending Post Cab a little bit later than usual, but it was a good morning. We heard a lot. We heard from Minister Samuda countering some of the narratives out there in as clear a manner as he could. And we also had the one, the only Ed Bartlett, the Minister of Tourism for the entire world. And we also were able to get some really good questions in this morning. And so I thank you for joining us. We'll see you at our next post-cabinet press briefing. And as always, may God continue to bless this wonderful country, Jamaica, land we love. Thank you all.